Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pod and the Pendulum, the horror movie podcast that is dedicated to covering every single horror movie franchise, one movie in one episode at a time. I am your host, Mike Snoonian, joined once again by my other co-host,
Jerry Smith. What is up?
How are we feeling tonight, Jerry?
I am feeling so excited, which says a lot. Like, these episodes are my favorite, like the episodes on the films and franchises that I despise. Like, this is my Halloween 6 or my, my Nightmare on Elm Street remake. This is that movie for Friday the 13th, but I'm excited.
I was going to say, by Halloween 6, you mean the movie that's due for critical reevaluation and is much better than its reputation suggests.
I am so excited to get to that episode.
I think we're going to be taken to school on that episode, to be quite honest, but I'm definitely...
Well, yeah, I mean, Anya Stanley's going to be on that one.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Jason Goes to Hell.
So a little bit of housekeeping before we introduce our guests. Want to say thanks to our listeners. Again, this week and this month, we just keep seeing some growth, and we really appreciate that. We got another new review this week over on iTunes. So that leads us to the two things you can do to help this little engine keep kind of chugging along here. And that is A, follow us over at Twitter at Pod and Pendulum. And also feel free to leave us a review over at iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcast, because every time we get a new review, we see a bunch of new downloads and the time it takes to post that. So we really do appreciate you guys taking a few minutes and leaving some really kind words. I know that they're not all written by my mom because they're not. I don't think she has that many iTunes accounts. So
if we have any negative ones, they were definitely written by my mom.
Probably. And I would definitely hunt down and kill a person who gave us a negative review. If you give us a 1-star review, we will come after you with everything that we have and crush you.
Also, really quickly, in the spirit of kind of plugging friend shows and stuff, there's one podcast that I listened to this last week, and I really enjoyed it. It's called the VHUS podcast. That's VHUS. And what's interesting about this podcast that I listened to was they take a movie, say it's like a exorcism movie, and they would talk about the movie, and their guest would be someone that works in that field. And the newest episode is on Teen Witch, and their guest is a real witch talking about the movie. So the whole idea of that show is really interesting. So I would recommend checking that out.
And that's on VHUS?
Yeah, it's called VHUS.
I am going to download a couple episodes tonight to listen to after this is over, when I should be editing. So we have some guests tonight. I'm really excited to bring them both on. One of them has jumped in to help us in the last moment because, surprisingly, a bunch of people actually want to talk about Jason Goes to Hell. Up first, we have Mike Vanderbilt, the assistant editor over at dailygrindhouse.com. You can also find his writing and podcasting over at Consequence of Sound, and occasionally you'll find him writing and contributing to the AV Club as well. Mike, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me, guys. A pleasure chatting with you, especially you, Jerry. Jerry and I interacted several times online, and I feel like we were mirror images of each other when we were adolescents, judging by our interests.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Although Jason Goes to Hell is a much better movie than than Halloween 6.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited. I'm excited for you to be on the show. Mike is definitely the Anthony Bourdain of horror.
Oh, put that on my tombstone.
Excellent. Put Avenge Me on my tombstone, and then we have a good time. And we're also joined by Jason Parker from Friday the 13th franchise.com, curator of all things Friday the 13th, and someone we've actually used when researching and looking up things for each of our episodes. So we're excited to have Jason on. Jason, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing real great. Thank you for having me on to talk about one of my favorite Friday the 13th movies ever.
Jerry, we're going to just gang up on Jerry tonight, it sounds like.
You know what's funny is hearing all three of you guys already talk so just passionately about this movie. I'm already having a blast. I prefer talking to people who like things I don't, or vice versa, more than just everyone that feels the same. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yep. I would say it's definitely a breath of fresh air over Jason Takes Manhattan. So we'll start with you, Jason. What is it about Friday the 13th? Oh, actually, it's not even Friday the 13th now. What is it about Jason Goes to Hell that you love?
Well, I have to say it was the very first Friday the 13th or Jason movie that I got to see in the theater by myself without parents or sneaking in when we were younger. So that alone, it was like a big event for me. But the craziest thing about it was I bought the movie magazine. I had the Fangoria magazines, but I purposely did not read about what the movie was about. And so when I went into the film, I'd only seen the Entertainment Tonight spot that they were running where they actually showed Jason being blown up. And I thought they showed the end of the movie. So when I went in to watch the movie and I was with my buddies and all of a sudden they blow him up right away, it was a what the fuck moment. And I'm like, what are they doing? I thought they were doing the whole, self-aware thing. They're filming a movie about Jason in the movie. And from there, like the ride they take you on, the effects work, the mythology, going back to the town and actually getting to know the characters in town again, which is something they hadn't really done since the earlier films. I love the ride and the fact that it was just different. And then they brought Jason back at the end, right at the very end, to kind of satisfy you that thirst, that want for him.
Yep.
And I just love the energy they brought to it. And ever since then, I've been a huge fan.
Excellent. And how about yourself, Mike? What is it about Jason Goes to Hell that tickles you?
Jason, similar to you, this was the first one that I saw at the show. My dad took us on Friday, August 13th, took a bunch of neighborhood kids to Ford City 14 on Chicago's South Side. And for some reason, the afternoon showing of Jason Goes to Hell was packed that afternoon. And there's no better movie to see with a packed audience, a packed, very vocal, very loud audience. I will never forget that during the Diner Massacre when she jumps over the counter and pulls out the shotgun and some guy just screams like, "Oh my God, that's a double barrel." And it's the silliest thing, but even when I rewatched it for this episode, like I was reminded of that. And for me, it's hard to separate the nostalgia of it that, I saw it when I was 13, which is just a great age to see a movie like this. But reassessing it as an adult it's the imagination that they bring into the series. And Daily Grindhouse has 3 separate pieces defending Jason Goes to Hell, which I was only involved in one of them. But I think that speaks volumes that people are always quick to deride this one, but people are even quicker to defend it. And my defense of it against anybody who would dislike the film is like, after 8 entries, what else were you supposed to do? And now my immediate answer wouldn't be turn it into The Hidden, but that's what they did. And it works like gangbusters still to this day.
I feel like Jack Shoulder should get a paycheck anytime someone watches Jason Goes to Hell for The Hidden.
So this was also the first Friday that I saw in theaters as well. I was 18 years old. I went opening weekend on a Sunday with a date, and the same thing. It was basically packed house on a late Sunday afternoon, everybody hooting and hollering and having like a really good time with it. So to me, like there's that nostalgia factor of being able to go see this movie in a packed house. And like it's the first Friday the 13th you're seeing that you're not renting, but actually seeing in the big screen. So I just had a blast with it. I thought it was like so much fun. And it was really fun to go back. Like, I think later on I convinced myself, I don't really like that movie. And then rewatching it, I'm like, I'm out of my mind. Like, this movie's fan-fucking-tastic. So let's take a... Yeah. And Jerry?
Jerry, what do you think about Jason Goes to Hell?
I was in junior high when the film came out, and I was so excited. Because at that point, like, you're young enough at that age to not really have these kind of like really thought out opinions about a lot of these movies. Like, I mean, even then I was a huge fan of Jason Takes Manhattan. which is a movie that, I mean, as much as I love the franchise, it's hard for me to even sit through these days. So, I mean, at 12 or 13, I would have digested anything thrown at me. I saw it opening night. I remember a friend of mine asked his mom if he could go with me, and she said no, because, you know, obviously something bad's going to happen in a theater if you see a new Friday the 13th movie on Friday the 13th. And I remember that trailer, man. Like, it was just so cool, you know? It's just, even at that age, though, and that age where you'll watch anything, like, I walked out of it just kind of feeling, like, really weird. Kind of like the same feeling, and I'm going to be comparing these two a lot during this episode, but the same feeling that when I was, you know, I think 14, 15, that I went to see Halloween 6 in the theater. You know, I walked out of both of these films thinking, like, man, that's interesting, and maybe I would have enjoyed those movies if they were called something else. But I mean, the explanations is what bothered me. You know, like Halloween 6,
Right.
It bothers me that the scariest character in history, in my opinion, is reduced to being controlled by a senior citizen cult.
Mhm.
Or, you know, or like, even staying on Halloween for a quick second, or Rob Zombie's Halloween. It bothered me that the scariest character of all time was reduced to, oh, he's just a long-haired Kiss fan that's really pissed and kills his family because his sister doesn't take him trick-or-treating. Like, the fact that the Jason Voorhees that I grew up just adoring, and yeah, you've seen the movie so many times before that, you know, like, basically staying on that formula. But in all honesty, and maybe this is a lack of personality on my part, that formula is what I love about the series. And it's those entries that kind of went off the rails, and Jason Goes to Hell kind of felt like the Jason that I loved is basically a worm. Like, what the fuck? You know? and I'm not going to get negative on this episode. I mean, you know, anyone that listens to the show knows that, like, I love talking about things that I'm not even a fan of. But, like, I remember just walking out, like, not even wanting to talk about the movie for a little while because I just didn't know what the hell I had just seen.
Well, like, you know, with Jason Goes to Hell, it's a very divisive movie among the fans of that franchise. I can tell you on a daily basis and social media that you have a lot of fans who absolutely despise it, and it's because of that fact, like you mentioned, where it's so different and it just does go off the rails. It's not your typical Friday movie. And most people are very traditional fans of the franchise. They want that formula, like you mentioned. And the fact that this did not give you that formula and dared to do something very different, I think to this day really, really has people up in arms. I mean, that's probably the most talked about movie out of any of the movies on a daily basis that I've seen, especially through social media.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about where the Friday series was at this point. It had been about, what year? 1989 is when Jason Takes Manhattan came out. So it had been about 4 years, or the longest stretch without a Jason Voorhees movie since the start of the franchise.
And you have to remember that Freddy had his final film, 2 years before this?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like you're just trying to wrap all these guys up.
Right. But something happened in between, like Freddy being dead and this movie coming out, and that would have been Paramount and Phil Scuderi finally wiping their hands clean of the Friday the 13th franchise and selling the rights to New Line Cinema and Sean Cunningham. But they didn't sell the name Friday the 13th. They just sold the characters like Jason Voorhees and his traits like the hockey mask, Crystal Lake, and his history as like a drowned special needs kid. Like all of those things stayed in. They kept the name Friday the 13th, though. So you can now make more Jason movies at the studio, but you can't call them Friday the 13th.
Well, you know what's funny about that is, and yeah, Phil Scuderi was definitely somewhat of a sketchy individual. But I can't help but feel sorry that he only got maybe $400,000 or $500,000 out of that deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you almost have to laugh at that. This guy was like shepherding the series throughout the whole franchise. I mean, he was responsible for so many iconic deaths. You know, getting on the phone, telling them, you know, put this death in, put that death in, and they sell it. Paramount gets all this money, and Phil Scuderi gets maybe $400,000.
Right.
Like, it's, man, yikes.
I mean, Scuderi used to act out what he wanted for the kill scenes at these little restaurants in the north end of Boston, like the Italian district in Boston. He would, like, you know, be in these crowded restaurants and be like, no, you gotta, you know, get up from this table and start acting out what he wanted to see in these movies, which I think is just hilarious to think of.
Mm-hmm.
So But the idea now is like at this point, New Line has the rights to Freddy Krueger, to Leatherface, and to Jason Voorhees. So what springs to mind when you think of Freddy and Jason being in the same studio now?
Well, it's the same thing that, Adam Marcus said was his idea. Tom McLaughlin says he had part of it, and Sean Cunningham. Like, everyone wanted to see Freddy versus Jason. And like the hockey mask, I find it really funny that, like the hockey mask, everyone seems to want to take credit for the idea.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you wanted to take credit for the idea, you could look at every sixth grader on a playground in the late 80s had this idea. This is like the no-brainer of ideas.
And what's funny is it is that weird idea that shouldn't work, but it does. Like, growing up, I had so many dumb ideas that I would try to pitch to, like, friends, like you said, at the schoolyard. Like, I'm still waiting for Candyman versus Leprechaun, because in fourth or fifth grade, that was, like, the best idea ever.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only reason why Sean got the rights back to begin with, is he wanted to make Freddy vs. Jason. That was it. That was the only reason he went and got those rights back. And then once, they realized that New Line had other plans with Wes Craven to go make New Nightmare, he pretty much was just like, okay, I guess we're going to try to make another Jason movie. And, and Jason Goes to Hell was born.
Well, what's really funny about that is, like, Sean Cunningham goes through that and he's like, okay, well, let's make another one. But the idea that he came to the realization, like, oh, let's make another one, and who better to get my son's 23-year-old friend to write and direct the new Friday the 13th.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the only thing he told him was just get him out of the mask?
Well, Cunningham says that. Says that, but even in Crystal Lake Memories, or no, Marcus says that. Cunningham said in Crystal Lake Memories that he never said that, and he didn't care about the mask one way or the other, so he had no, like, bad feelings about that.
I am more prone to believe Adam Marcus when it comes to that. I think Cunningham seems like a rewriter of history. I mean, he was on the record of saying he thought the idea of Jason being a killer was a really stupid one to begin with in part 2. And so I kind of believe Adam Marcus when he says, like, that's the one directive, was get him out of that mask as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways, Sean was just trying to save face over the years, just so the fans wouldn't get mad at him. It sounds strange, but that's kind of the gist of what you get out of that.
It's such an odd directive, too, especially after the deal that they made. That you get the hockey mask with that, but get him out of the mask. It's bizarre.
Well, especially after, like, the series becoming so popular as it, like, had gotten at that point. I mean, Cunningham comes into this very popular franchise that he created, but kind of went off on a different direction, and the different direction that it went on became what the series was known for. So he comes onto this movie, and he's just like, well, yeah, I'm back. Let's get rid of the thing that kind of helps everyone identify the series.
Right. Let's get rid of the hockey mask, and let's get rid of Jason for, 3/4 of the movie.
Like, now that I'm talking about it, it's almost, like, so batshit insane that you can't help but, like, admire that decision.
Absolutely. And I also admire both New Line on both counts, that when they killed Freddy and they did kill Jason, they stuck to their guns long enough, if you don't count New Nightmare, which was supposed to be its own thing anyway.
Right. Because the New Nightmare movie is not the Freddy Krueger from the movies, but, a Freddy Krueger that was sprung from the movies. So, that was... We'll get to that one day when we cover the Nightmare series, but that was Wes Craven's middle finger to all the other movies.
Oh, and it's a good middle finger.
And it's very much ahead of its time, too.
Oh, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. Jerry, you had mentioned Adam Marcus, like, who better to direct? Can you tell us a little bit about what Adam Marcus had done to this point in order to kind of maybe warrant getting tapped for this movie?
Well, Adam Marcus grew up with Noel Cunningham, Sean's son. And so, I mean, they were buds. I believe they went to film school together or something along those lines. And Adam Marcus had originally, from what I was reading and stuff, originally he was set to direct. His first film was going to be My Boyfriend's Back, which his friend Dean Lorey wrote. But, I mean, Disney kind of wasn't on board with this really super fresh, 20 22, 23-year-old filmmaker, so they didn't think he was qualified enough, so it went to Bob Balaban, which is really interesting if you think about Bob Balaban. But, I mean, yeah, that was his first break. He didn't get the job, you know. He went to Cunningham kind of begging for, you know, a chance, and Cunningham's like, okay, well, we're doing a Friday the 13th movie. I mean, as a horror fan, you know, I would have jumped at that too. I mean, you know, how cool would it be? Like your first movie, a Friday the 13th movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's really interesting too with him when they were choosing him. You know, Cunningham had went to New Line and said, "This is the guy I want," and they were like really shaky about that, kind of like with My Boyfriend's Back with Disney, where they were like, "Well, who is this guy?" And so basically, they said, "Why don't you just go and film a scene, film one scene, let's see what it looks like." And I believe it was the scene where the two, Stephen and his police officer friend are fighting, and they're sitting on the ground next to the cop car. And that's the scene that they filmed and showed to the execs at New Line. And once they saw that, Mike DeLuca at the time, who was one of the heads there, he was like, "This looks good. Let's do it. We'll roll with him."
Oh, Mike DeLuca, writer of Freddy's Dead.
one of the 50 writers of Freddy is Dead, or one of the producers.
You know, but I'll give him credit. He also wrote In the Mouth of Madness, so he's not that bad.
And poor DeLuca wasn't even around to the end at New Line. He was shepherded out the door right as Freddy versus Jason was going to go to from script to screen, but that's a story.
Can you imagine being one of the people that really like kind of like steward that kind of like process and really, you know, try to nurture it, and then like last minute you're like, well, sorry.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug, man. Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
And not only was he pushed out for Freddy vs. Jason, but he was the main proponent of Jason X. And when they pushed him out, that's why Jason X got shelved for 2 years before it got released theatrically in the U.S.
Man.
So what do we think? Here's one of the things that jumps out to me about Marcus's vision for the movie, and something I really like about it. It's an older cast. If you grew up loving the Friday the 13th movies and seeing them in theaters during their heyday, you're no longer a high school student. Matter of fact, like if you were around from 80 to 84, back when the series really was at its creative and commercial peak, you're not only out of high school, but you're out of college at this point. Maybe getting married, maybe starting to have kids. So you're about a decade plus removed. And I think that is reflected in the cast here. You have a much older cast, and you're not camp counselors anymore, but you get Erin Gray from shows like Buck Rogers and Silver Spoons as like a diner waitress who is engaged or married to the town sheriff. You get like Richard Gant, who is a coroner, one of those really good like that guy actors who is the only good thing about Rocky V.
Touch me, I'll sue.
George, what are you gonna take? I got nothing. You got George Washington Duke, and he still works in this day in things like the Mindy Project, Deadwood. His first like kind of leading role was in like a TBS comedy called Men of a Certain Age, which is what Ray Romano did after Everybody Loves Raymond came to an end. And I love John LeMay as the lead here. John LeMay playing the lead role in Friday the 13th, the series, now comes back to take the lead role in Jason Goes to Hell. I find this dude charming as hell and don't know why he has not been in more things.
He's fun to watch. Like, he has such a presence on screen that he comes off like a Chris Pratt or someone like that. I mean, not visually, obviously, but, you know, someone that can lead a movie and actually has like this really humorous presence about him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a bummer.
What jumped out to you guys of the casting or the characters in this movie compared to some of the other Friday the 13th?
I was surprised that they went. I mean, looking back at it now, I'm glad they went with the older cast. I like that. I think the kind of soapy melodrama-ness of it adds something to the series. Again, like, we've been through this formula 8 times before. Let's do something different. Mm-hmm. But I am surprised that they went with that, because I feel like New Line tried to do that with The Dream Child, mm-hmm. which I enjoy that film. but it didn't seem to work as far as the box office went. So I'm surprised that they did that with their other big franchise that they had their hands on.
What kind of always not ruined the movie for me, because I mean I try to give it a fair shake every time I watch Jason Goes to Hell. But one of the things that takes me out is growing up. One of the many things that I loved about the franchise is that the victims were kind of like the kids that were, fictionally just a few years older than me. Like going to see Jason Goes to Hell, I was like 13 years old. So I was expecting more like late teens people, like, the characters before. And it's like, I don't want to watch a movie with people that were my dad's age at the time because, I was a kid. I wanted that kind of formula. I wanted the teens getting killed. And, I give them nothing but props for doing something different. But I think it lacks that kind of relatability to its characters.
Sure. No, I definitely see where you're coming from in that respect, but I've always been a fan of quirky characters in the franchise, like Friday the 13th, The New Beginning. I love all of those characters. I think they make that movie so much better than it deserves to be. And with Jason Goes to Hell, I think it's a lot of the same. You have Rusty Schwimmer playing Joey B, that real eccentric owner of the diner.
Oh, those Rusty Schwimmer and Leslie Jordan are the two things about Jason Goes to Hell that I actually love. I mean, their scenes are so funny to watch. And Leslie Jordan, I think, is just one of the funniest guys around.
The bit with the gun when he's trying to knock the gun back is spectacular. It's great, yeah. But no, I love the whole setup with the characters in the town. I think it's great that they went back into the town to show you something, how this affected the residents. Like, you hadn't seen that in a very long time. The fact that they were celebrating Jason being killed, they had the Voorhees burgers, the Jason fingers, the whole deal. I really like that part of the story, separate just from the whole mythology that they were trying to set up with Jason.
Well, what's interesting is I find those scenes actually more entertaining than the actual violence. I love that about Jason Goes to Hell. I love that it shows, the inner workings of the people of the city. I think for me, the things that don't work about the film to me are just the parts where it feels weird watching a Friday the 13th movie where Stephen Culp's running around trying to kill people. You know what I mean? Like that, the body switching stuff, the body jumping stuff is the only things about the movie that kill it for me. I love it. When it shows the inner workings of the city. I love Rusty Schwimmer and Leslie Jordan's performances. I love the violence, and the kills are amazing. It's just, it still feels weird to me that, like, Jason is a worm in the movie, I can't seem to disconnect from that.
Yeah, I think that's the visuals that they wanted to employ in the film, like the in your face part of that definitely takes a lot of people out of the film. One of the things I always thought that maybe could have served the film better is, what if they went back to what the original film was which was a whodunit? Who is Jason in?
Yeah.
Where you're trying to guess which one is actually the killer, and if they had gone to that and actually had the people that just show the feet and the bottom of of their legs when they're in the woods, and the guessing part of it, if they could have went that route, I think it really would have added a little bit more to the film.
See, that's interesting because, I mean, who wouldn't want to watch basically a Friday the 13th take on The Thing? Like, that's such a great idea.
So I love the body horror that's in this movie, and we'll talk a little bit more about the effects work that K&B did going in, because I think it's some of the best effects in the series overall. But before we move away from that, I think there's one character that we do need to talk about, and that's Mr. And of course that character is, Jessica Kimball. No, that character is
Creighton Duke, man.
Creighton fucking Duke, bounty hunter extraordinaire.
That guy is basically the equivalent of, like, Dr. Loomis in the later movies, where he was just as crazy as Michael Myers, Like, Creighton Duke that guy is off his rocker the entire movie. Like, I love listening to his dialogue. I still have no idea what the guy, like, is saying half the time.
No.
I loved them from the moment I saw him, because I always liked when they would give a heroic foil to the villains in these horror movies, be it Tommy Jarvis, be it Alice Johnson, or just the Evil Dead movies. They followed Ash through all of them. Like, you never really saw a series that every movie also featured the hero. And Creighton Duke He wore a cowboy hat. He had a duster. I just thought he was cool.
He has some.
What did he mean every time he spoke?
Like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what his motivation was. Like, he just seemed to be there to antagonize people.
You know what he reminds me of?
He was just nice about it. Like, maybe he could have gotten some help, you know?
Creighton Duke reminds me of, like, an early prototype of the Rust Cole character in True Detective.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's all these, like, mystical things he's saying, and you have no idea what the fuck he means. Like, what?
It's just bizarre, like the hot dog through the donut line. It's just insane. It's like, where do you get that? Who comes up with that? You know?
Yep.
Like, on the fly. But
Dean Lorry, apparently.
Yeah. But he's an interesting character just because of the fact that, like you guys said, like, where does he come from and why is he there? And it's because of all the editing they did on the film and from the original script that you lose so much of the character's backstory. And if you didn't read the accompanying comics that they released at the time, or you didn't read the movie magazine, his motivation is just so out of left field that you don't understand. It's not until you actually get those pieces does it become, more sensical. It's not as nonsensical to you.
So what are those pieces? As someone that didn't read the movie magazine or the comics, what are those pieces that are missing?
So basically, he was on a camping trip of sorts, or a hiking trip with his wife, and Jason killed his wife. Mm-hmm. And that's what led him to become the bounty hunter and track serial killers.
Okay.
Wow, so he's basically the John Walsh.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah, he spends his life basically looking for the guy who killed his wife, but they never explain how he knows the family tree or how to kill Jason. I don't believe they ever really get into that at all.
Now, do you know if that was filmed and if that was part of the kind of redirects that came with the edit? Because I know there was a lot of subplots that were cut out. I mean,
sure.
Erin Gray's character was going to go on her honeymoon. Carrie Keegan and Stephen Culp weren't even a couple in the original edits. So that was changed. So, I mean, was that stuff filmed with Creighton Duke?
I believe never filmed. That was never filmed.
Are you sure? I have no knowledge of this, but as I was watching the rewatch, like there's that moment where he's got the baby at the end, and he says to what was the female lead? That's Carrie Keegan.
Carrie Keegan, yes.
He says, "Just give me 2 minutes," and then they hang out for 10 seconds, and then he just hands over the baby and says, "That's all the reasoning I need." So it's like, I assume that it was, I just have to assume it was filmed because that edit is really rough.
Like, where's the exposition, right? Where's that moment where he comes out and says, "Okay, this is why I'm doing it." There is a scene that they filmed in the police station. There's a whole other subplot that they never show on film. It kind of goes to what we're talking about, where he's already in the police station. The reason why he's in the jail cell when they bring Steven in is because he was
sitting on a white woman. That's why.
But he got caught trying to take Diana's body out of the morgue.
Jesus, that's some hardcore stuff.
Yeah, and that's why he's at the police station. And there's scenes that they filmed of the police bringing him into the station, and the sheriff basically pushing him up against the wall and telling him, "You son of a bitch," and
See, I want all of these scenes put back in for like a producer's cut, like Halloween 6. There I go again, because I mean with Halloween 6, really quickly, with Halloween 6, you get the producer's cut where all this stuff's put back in, and it doesn't make any more sense. It's even weirder. I mean, Paul Rudd stops Michael Myers with runes. Like, I want an off the rocker version of this movie, even more.
So, Jerry, you essentially want the Once Upon a Time in America cut of Jason Goes to Hell.
I want a 4-hour, assembly cut of Jason Goes to Hell, just so I can understand what is going on.
I'm surprised it hasn't happened, because while I was rewatching it, I was impressed with how brisk the movie is, but also, there's big chunks, especially if you know that there was stuff that was cut out, where you're like, oh yeah, there's big old plot holes in here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Like, screw the nerds wanting the Snyder cut. Give us the Marcus cut. # Marcus cut.
So, what do we think of Duke breaking Steven's fingers for no reason whatsoever in the jail in a very bizarre scene.
See, now and maybe this was like some real stretch in my head about why he would do that to Stephen, is that he needed to find out if Stephen was brave enough.
So ask him if he's brave enough.
Well, of course he's going to say he is.
Yeah,
I knew it was a stretch when I was coming up. That's the only reason I can think that the screenwriters would have said this has to happen.
What kind of dickhead said,
you know what? Duke who fucking talks all this weirdo shit at the diner. That's who breaks your finger.
It's like, yeah, I know how to defeat Jason, and I'll tell you if you let me break your fucking fingers. What?
He's obviously goofballs.
Yeah. I think you hit it on the head, Jerry. You said he's like crazy like Dr. Loomis. And Dr. Loomis is a different kind of crazy at the end of part 4, spoiler alert, he tries to gun down a 9-year-old girl.
Haven't we all?
As you do. So he's a much different kind of crazy, where Creighton Duke is definitely just likes to fuck with people. I can't think of another.
He gets a satisfaction, and you can tell from the scene in the diner, where he's talking to Aaron Gray's character. There's a look in Creighton Duke's eye that's just like, he's like that little shitty kid. My wife works in an interactive children's museum, and there's always that shitty kid that looks around at everything's like, yeah, I'm going to mess this up today.
Yes.
That's what Creighton Duke is.
Well, I think what's funny is behind the scenes, Stephen Williams, who played Creighton Duke and was also probably best known for Mr. X and the X-Files. Stephen Williams liked to party hard, I guess, behind the scenes. And he was definitely a Me Too moment waiting to happen with some of the stories that you read. So I find that there was maybe not a lot of like having to build that character from scratch going into the way that Williams played that role.
Oh, most definitely. And it seems that the actual filming of the movie was very, very stressful as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have everything from Kane Hodder kind of being somewhat disappointed in the lack of Jason, kind of like everyone. Mm-hmm. Tried to go to all the people who played the various, versions possessed by Jason and kind of just help them with little quirks that Jason would have done. And you would think that, someone had played Jason 2 times before, you'd listen to them. But then you have like Stephen Culp that was so against that he even goes on record in Crystal Lake Memories, because obviously this isn't going to go to print, goes on record saying that Kane Hodder is just a stuntman and a teamster. I'm sorry, but I'm not the biggest fan of the 4 movies that Kane Hodder was in as Jason, but he is fucking amazing as Jason in every one of them. Kane Hodder made the Jason that we recognize today. So for someone just to call him a stuntman, it's ridiculous.
I think that it's really important to note that in all 4 Friday movies that Kane Hodder is in, he brought his A game. And he's not my favorite Jason, but you're right. I think he's the one that you most identify with the character, and he brought his A game to every single scene he was in. And for Culp to say that is just so disrespectful.
And you have Kane Hodder kind of being bummed and helping people and nobody being receptive. Or you have Carrie Keegan and Adam Marcus despising each other by the end of the production, that Cunningham had to direct a couple of scenes because they couldn't be around each other. Keegan didn't want to be nude in the shower scene. Adam Marcus thought it would be high art unless, if she would did. It's just that, Creighton Duke, that guy was walking around with no clothes on set. It seemed like behind the scenes was just as nuts as the actual film.
And I think that comes in part of giving a 23-year-old kid this pretty big production and making it his first movie. You're kind of learning on the job as you go there.
Well, my son's 10 years old, and he came up with this franchise called Desserts of Evil about these possessed eclairs and danishes that would stop the end of the world. And I think that maybe he's kind of the same level as Adam Marcus when he did Jason Goes to Hell. So maybe Cunningham could kind of give him a shot.
So stay tuned for our special bonus episode when we interview Adam Marcus.
I'm just messing around.
So, wow. All right. So where do we go from here, folks? Where do we go from Desserts of Evil? And I don't just mean this episode. I mean with this show, period. With the next
effects.
50 episodes.
We have to talk to about the effects, because as much as I'm joking with you guys. Like, I don't hate Jason Goes to Hell as much as I'm saying I do. Like, it's not a movie I enjoy, but like I don't have
Right.
it's not on a list of movies I want to murder.
No, it's
You
not as
know,
shitty as Mandy. It's not as
you
nearly
know
as
what?
shitty
I
as
love
Mandy.
that movie, but I will give you that. But no, the effects in Jason Goes to Hell is definitely the highlight of the movie. I mean, KMB did such a great job. The tent scene is one of the best kills in the entire series, because what the tent kill is, it's getting every teenage like just horn dog that went to see these movies just for that. You know, like my older brother would only go with me to a Friday 13th movie because he wanted to see boobs. I wanted to see the great kicks. My brother wanted to see the boobs. But what the tent scene is in Jason Goes to Hell is getting people like my brother really excited, and then the girl gets split in half in the middle. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that whole delivery and the effects, just the effects in general for the film, are amazing.
It's really interesting that is one of the highlight scenes of the film, and it wasn't even in the original script. That was
after the fact, right?
Yeah,
Like a
they
reshot?
did a test screening with audiences, and every single one of the people that came out of the theater says you need to have a camp scene. You don't have enough kills, so they went back, wrote that scene up real quick. They brought back John LeMay, and they filmed the whole thing with the campers, and they had to whip up those effects really quick, which are unbelievable. And yeah, it's a spectacular scene, and it was really needed in the film, I think.
And
well,
LeMay,
what's also interesting is that behind the scenes, the two actors that were in the tent scene had previously dated and broken up by that point. So to be in the scene together must have been uncomfortable. And it's funny because, I mean, even in films like Rob Zombie's Halloween, Christina Klebb, I believe, dated the guy that she was supposed to be in the sex scene with, and they had broken up since then. So it seems like maybe people in horror films are just sadistic.
Yeah. They wanted that sexual tension, just everything from before.
One of my favorite kills and moments in the movie and in the series is the face that is smushed through the grating of the autopsy table.
Spectacular, yes.
Oh, it's just
That's
bloody,
Dean Lorey, right?
gory. Yeah, it is just, it's awesome. Like that, at that moment, you're like, all right, we know what we're going to get into here. What do we think of the look of Jason in this movie?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it's great that they went and combined different looks from previous films into one character. Just using the exposed spine from like part 7, and you have of course the iconic axe cut, and and the side of his face where the mask is kind of like from 6, where the motor blade kind of pushed it away, and it just and then of course you have the oversized head, which kind of harkens back to part 2, and you kind of put all these things together, and it's like a greatest hits of Jason looks. And in that suit that Kane had to endure just to get that's a whole thing they had to run. It's awesome. It's a great look, but what he had to go through to get in that thing is crazy.
That's interesting. It was much more of a process than the New Blood look.
Yeah, it was. It's an entire suit that he zipped up in, and in fact, they had to run a cooling system through the suit. That's how hot it was in there. They had an actual cooling system. He couldn't take it off easily, and so like all the skin, that's one suit, and then they would put the clothes over the top of that.
Oh wow!
And then the hood actually velcroed to the suit that he was wearing, and then they put the hockey mask over that, and it buttoned on. The hockey mask itself didn't actually slide over with the straps. The straps were actually built into the hood that he wore, and then they snapped the front of the mask onto the straps.
Wow, that must have been crazy for Kane Hodder. I mean, we're lucky for him; he's not in the movie at all.
So, Mike, what are your thoughts? You've been quiet for a bit. Like, what are your thoughts on the effects and the look of Jason here?
Like you guys are saying, going back to the tent sequence, like that's an all timer as far as Friday the 13th kills go. Like that split, and I'm guessing it was cut a little bit, but it's still pretty gory for an R-rated flick when the pole goes right through that chick. And as far as Jason's look, like I dig it, except like you were saying, Kane Hodder's never been my favorite Jason, even though he's played him the most. I think he's too big, too bulky. I prefer part 3 Jason, where he's kind of a a slender hillbilly. That's the Jason I love. But I do like you were going back to what you're saying about the greatest hits of the Mask. Like it's awesome that they paid that much detail to what had happened previously in the series. Like that shows a little bit of respect for people who had been coming to these movies for over 10 years at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking on what you're talking about, maybe it being cut a little bit for an R rating. When Jason Goes to Hell came out on VHS, it was released in an R-rated and an unrated cut. So you got to choose which one you know.
It's interesting with that because when they were filming, Mike DeLuca basically told them, go ahead and film whatever you want because we're going to make a director's cut, which had never been done before.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like, it's so interesting that, I mean, if that kind of release plan had happened for New Blood, I mean, could that have been saved? Could that have saved the New Blood from being slaughtered by the MPAA, I wonder?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
I mean, like, look at, like, the amount. I mean, this, like you said, it was way before the time of, like, director's cuts and that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember when I went to rent it, the unrated version, like, I was blown away at the fact that I'm finally get to see a Friday the 13th movie the way it was meant, meant to be seen.
And I think it goes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it goes to show that, like, as much as we can talk about how kind of batshit crazy some of the decisions New Line made with this movie was, like, they were definitely showing the film more respect than Paramount had been showing. I mean, throughout the entire run of the series, like Paramount just saw him as a cash cow.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
Like Paramount, to this day, they could, if they were able to like restore some of the footage that had been lost and put together these director's cuts, like that's a whole, like, I don't know a Friday the 13th fan that wouldn't go ahead and buy their movies for the third or fourth time even, but they just have like zero interest, and they're almost, like we've said before, seem a little bit embarrassed by these movies.
No, they always have been. But even going back to the film itself, it is such an interesting ride, and like I've said many times, it's not a movie that I particularly enjoy, but it is interesting how out there it is. I mean, there's tons of nods to other franchises, I mean, does it take place in the Evil Dead or the Creepshow mythology? I mean, are those universes? I mean,
when I was 13, I almost lost my mind when I saw the Necronomicon in the Voorhees house. But it kind of it was a weird way of saying, yeah, the Voorhees family's always been into witchy stuff. Like, it's cool.
And I think that's something to love about the movie, and just to be like, because it does it in a way where it doesn't call attention to it, but it like kind of brings all these fans from all these different franchises kind of under one big umbrella tent at that point. And when I
saw that in the theater, and it's the weirdest image ever. Once I say it, you guys will imagine it and think it's even weirder. When I was a kid, at 13, I saw it in the theater, and I saw the Necronomicon. The first thing that popped in my head was Pamela Voorhees in her sweater with a chainsaw hand. Like, that is the fan film that we need to see get made.
That's certainly an image right there.
No, but seriously, I think that it would be a real disservice to the movie, and especially fans of the movie like yourselves, to not discuss the shaving scene, guys.
All right. So I'll get on this first, because that was one of those things when I saw it when I was 13, when I saw it when I was 15 even, I said, okay, maybe I'll understand this. Maybe I'll get this when I'm older. I watched this 3 days ago. I still don't understand why Jason shaves that guy. I don't get it.
Jason's not the authority on shaving. I mean, look at his shave job in Friday the 13th 2.
He does much better by part 3, though. He's got that clean, shaved look, and he's even got the bald chrome dome going, so it gets better for him.
And that's before the Quattro. Like, he was using one of those bullshit disposable razors, man.
So I can say that, like, I think I'm a bearded gentleman. Jerry, I know you've got a great big shaggy beard. Not everybody likes sucking face with someone with a beard. I remember when I played in a band, we practiced every Saturday morning, and we always went to like Harold's ice cream and breakfast diner in Alston, like around the corner from our practice space. And there was this really, cute girl who worked behind the counter, and she gave like our drummer like this note, like saying like, look, shave your beard and you'll get nookie, was literally the note that she gave him.
So was that Jason's idea when he was shaving people and Jason goes to hell?
He just didn't want to suck face with someone.
If you really stop and think about it, it's the idea of saying that out loud. Jason Voorhees shaving somebody. Like, what?
Yeah.
What
It's got to go back to the kissing thing. Like, you're being facetious, but like it's the only explanation that I can think of.
I'm not being facetious. I'm dead serious.
It's such a weird scene. It kind of gives them a weird character trait that you've never seen ever before, and it is a what the fuck moment. It's just like, what, it's one thing if he wants to shave him, but why did he dress him down completely naked and tie him to a table to do it? It's so odd.
These sequels, it's these franchise sequels that do these weird things that it makes you just stop and think like, what? Like, who would have thought Jason really cared about shaving? Who would have thought, Michael Myers is weird for eating a dog in the first one, but at least he's not impregnating his niece by part 6. Like, what? I mean, it's... Oh.
So who wants to take a stab at doing the mythology rundown of this movie? Who wants to take a stab at trying to explain what Marcus and company were going for here?
Well, I had always read that this movie did not take place in the Paramount Friday the 13th universe, that this was, the Paramount movies were based on a real-life Jason Voorhees, and that's the Jason Voorhees that is in Jason Goes to Hell.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing that I've read. I don't think you need to go to those the links to explain it, but that was one thing I remember reading, probably in this movie magazine that I got here.
What do you think, Jason?
Well, originally the idea was to try to tie it to Manhattan, and the idea was that Jason washes up out. Dead serious. He washes up out from Manhattan into a river back into Crystal Lake. And, the boat got there, right? The boat got there, so why can't you wash back? So this shadowy figure grabs him out of the lake, drags him back to a cabin. It ends up being his brother.
Wait a minute, this is Halloween 5. This is Halloween 5.
and that's how the character Elias Voorhees came in. It's his brother. It's supposed to be his brother, and his brother eats the heart. And that was the original intention. And then they scrapped that and said, we don't want the brother in. We're just going to bring in a sister he didn't have and work her into the mythology. And that's kind of where it was born out of, because they didn't want to they didn't want it tied to the Paramount films. So they were just like, we're going to start from the beginning with the prologue, and we're going to, start that way. In terms of like what the mythology is, I think even Adam Marcus said that he's kind of like, he's like Hell's assassin. That's what they were going for.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, that's what I remember him saying that one time. He's Hell's assassin, and his job is to just take out everybody in this area because, he was wronged, his mom was wronged, and that's the way it's going to be.
If he's Hell's assassin, then it is a disservice not to get a Jason going to the hotel in John Wick for a showdown. Forget Jason versus Freddy, or throw Ash in there. Let's just give us Keanu Reeves.
So and I had read, Jason, to your point, or Mike, to your point about Jason not being part of the Paramount series. I had read that in the book, I think, Slash of the Titans, and I think that was one of the treatments that was going to be considered for Freddy versus Jason. It was like the trial of Jason Voorhees, where the real life serial killer was being brought up on charges that the Paramount movies did.
Wow, and that was a script?
That was one of the scripts that was. That might have even been the script that was done by Ronald Moore of Battlestar Galactica. I think that was.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
In 1999, I came across a script online, and I read it for one of the proposed Freddy vs. Jason sequels, and it was the survivors of Jason Goes to Hell teaming up with Alice from Nightmare 5 for basically going against Freddy versus Jason. And to this day, that was super interesting.
I love that. I love that idea. So the specific mythology that goes on, and I do want to circle back on Jason Takes Manhattan for one question I have after, gentlemen. The specific mythology of this movie is Jason Voorhees is not necessarily Jason Voorhees, but some sort of like that hell beast that can transfer from person to person. And if he is killed, he can only be reborn again through the body of a Voorhees woman. And Jerry, you made the note here that Erin Gray gets the Evil Dead treatment. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's one of the things about the film that genuinely bothers me, and not so much in a oh, I just don't like this movie, but like this doesn't sit well with me. I love Evil Dead with a passion. I mean, my knuckles are tattooed with the words Evil Dead. But one thing that it's been like, it's happened in multiple films that it just doesn't sit well with me in general. Erin Gray's scene, she goes to the premiere of this movie she's in, and she sees, this worm goes right up between her legs, into her vagina, basically. And it's just like the same thing. She had no knowledge that was even filmed or the same as Evil Dead, where there's like the tree rape, and there's that shot of the tree just going right up there. Or Sharon Stone not knowing that they were going to film pretty much up close in that Basic Instinct shot. I'm wondering, like, shouldn't there be laws against this stuff, or has there since been laws against that stuff that, like, it's almost like an exploitative thing to do to an actor?
Right. Oop, what happened there? Did someone fall over?
I'm still here.
Okay.
No, but I think it's interesting that these things happen. No, it's odd. Like, and ever since reading that, I don't remember if it was Crystal Lake Memories or something else. Like that scene's always very uncomfortable for me now. Like, it's the same with Evil Dead. The tree scene, it's kind of uncomfortable knowing that the actual, actor involved wasn't notified about this kind of stuff, right. And it feels very, violating.
And it's weird with the Evil Dead, and we'll get to that when we cover Evil Dead one day, is that Sam Raimi had said, like, the one thing he regretted from the Evil Dead was the tree rape scene. He's like, we shouldn't have done that. And then it's in the remake, which he produced and was pretty hands-on with. It's like, that is bizarre. That's like, I don't think that scene, it's not like I don't think it's fondly remembered like, say, Freddy popping through the wall over Nancy's bed in the original Elm Street movie. It's like not remembered like that, where you got to have this in, or it's not an Evil Dead movie.
Well, the thing is, like, I understand that stuff being in, films like I Spit on Your Grave, or films that deal with the repercussions of rape, or Miss 45 and that kind of stuff. But it feels really weird being in a Friday the 13th movie. Like, right. Jason's reborn through the vagina of his sister. Like, that just sounds weird. Like, what is with people? This is what's funny. What is with the off the rails entries in every franchise having to do with raping a family member?
I don't know.
Like Jamie being impregnated by Michael Myers in 6. You know what I mean? Like, it's odd.
Yeah. And even Dream Child, which, Mike, I think you mentioned earlier, like, there's the implication that that's Freddy's baby.
That's really strange.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very odd thing, especially knowing what the history of that character was supposed to be.
It's interesting knowing that there was at one point a meeting in all of these franchises saying, okay, so how do we sum this up? Well, let's take this iconic slasher and involve them in,
He's a worm.
He's a worm. He's led by a senior citizen cult, Like, yeah, let's guys have this one.
So I have a question for Mike and Jason about Jason Takes Manhattan, because this came up during recording our I know. The question is like, not just why. So the end of that movie, the end of this movie, Jason Takes Manhattan, toxic sludge turns Jason back into like a 12-year-old little boy. Now...
Sure. And then he's a worm. All right, fine.
Sure.
Cash to check. To check.
My question is, are Rennie and Scott just leave him there? Like, they leave this 12-year-old special needs kid in the sewers of New York. Like, are they horrible people for doing this? Like,
well, I mean, in all due respect, that kid, a few minutes like earlier, was like this big hulking beast that tried to murder them and all their friends.
But now he's just a little kid.
If you
I
really
can't
wanna,
even. Yeah.
if you really want to stretch, like maybe that was just her vision of him, being redeemed in some way. Like
She definitely had visions in that movie. I mean, she was on some crazy stuff.
Like when she saw Jason's dead body laying there, but when she saw it, he was like a little kid. Now, like it was like he was cleansed. Maybe that's it. I wouldn't take that kid. No, I don't. I'm not good with children anyway. So like, yeah, let's get out of here. We're in New York. Let's go. Let's go over to Katz's, see if they're still open.
Did you at least call child services and wait?
Call somebody. I don't want to. I don't want to be completely heartless. Hey, look. Like I did what I could, but there's a kid in the sewer. Like let the Ninja Turtles take care of him. Let the Ninja Turtles take care of him.
Jason, your thoughts on this?
Oh man, I'll tell
this
you,
is really upsetting to me. Like this is out of everything we've discussed in any of these movies. This is like the bug up my ass that I have.
I gotta say, first of all, I can't even watch the end of that movie anymore. I turn it off once they go in the sewer. I hate that ending. I hate it with a passion. It drives me crazy. It's
terrible Jason makeup. Some of the worst Jason makeup I have ever seen when that mask comes off in the sewer.
It's really bad. But the way I always kind of took that ending was like kind of like we were already talking about is like the evil has been taken away. Like washed away, cleansed definitely. And is the boy really there or is she seeing him? I mean, I guess that's still for interpretation. But honestly, I just fucking leave him. I wouldn't even go near him. Gone. That's it. Gone.
What am I going to do walking around with a half-naked kid through Times Square?
And then when you're stopped by the authorities, what do you say? Well, this guy tried to murder me, but now he's a kid, so it's okay. You go into a mental hospital immediately.
I mean, Toby found them. They're fine, right? The dog found them, and they're good in the middle of Times Square.
Oh, it just has never sat well with me. This has never sat well. I'm trying to think of what else that we have here to really go over. Oh, you know what? We haven't even talked about the final shot, like what this whole movie existed for, basically. I just almost skipped completely over it. So let's talk a little bit about the end of this movie. Jason is pulled back down to hell by some sort of were they CGI demons or kind of like cell painted? I cannot remember.
No, they
were miniatures, right?
They looked like they was just like big rubber hands or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, they had actors actually in these, like exactly like you say, like big hands. Originally they had built models, table models and they were animatronic, and they scrapped all of it because it just didn't look really good, and so they ended up going with the large, the regular size puppets just with the hands instead of the more elaborate like tree demons coming out to pull them down.
Right. So after he's pulled down to hell, the mask is left above ground. You get the hand reach out, and that hand is played by Kane Hodder, making him the only person to play both Freddy and Jason in a movie. And it pulls the hockey mask down while we hear that laugh. And when you guys saw this, all of us saw this in theaters, like what immediately sprang to mind the moment that happened?
I didn't have time to think because the audience just started chanting, Freddy, Freddy, Freddy. And that's what I'll always remember.
Well, I looked at it. As soon as it happened, I was like froze. Like, did that just happen? Did I imagine that? Because I always had thought about that happening, and I'm like, did I just see something? And then I had to ask my buddies. I'm like, did that really happen? And like, hell yeah, that happened. I'm like, right away. I'm like, they're gonna come out with that movie next year, like right away. And of course,
that's what I thought too. When I watched it when I was 13, that was the first thing I thought. Oh man, I cannot wait until Freddy vs. Jason comes out in 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
I didn't know that we'd be waiting until 2003.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like the audience I was in went bananas for it. I went nuts for it to the point where I can't believe my date actually had sex with me after because I was going so bananas.
Okay, how old were you again?
18. This is the night I lost my virginity, folks. This is why
Jason Goes to Hell. Jason Goes to Hell was?
This was that we went on this. I can remember the date, August 15th, 1993, because you don't forget this shit. opening weekend, and we went to this little golf course near her house after. It was, no one's there. It was night. And, we played a little game called Just a Tip, just to see how it feels, and let's move from there.
Oh, my God.
So that is why. So if no other reason, this movie gets 5 stars. Greatest movie. 5 star. Would watch again. But I remember the crowd going bananas for it. And I'm like, yeah, this movie must be made already. It must be coming out, like you said, Jerry, next year. And then I kind of feel like Wes Craven kind of fucked this up for everybody, because he was like, well, I want to do another Freddy Krueger movie now. And they're like, all right, Wes, let's see what you got. And I don't love New Nightmare. So
here's the deal with that. Wes Craven might have fucked it up a little bit, but at the same time, I think going through 4,000 scripts for that movie and not really knowing what direction they wanted to go, you know what I mean? I feel like that is the thing that really kept it going, or kept it, from being made.
Mm-hmm. So I love the ending to this movie, and it's very basic. And I know that Adam Marcus isn't the first person, or even the 1 millionth person, to think of let's put Freddy and Jason together. But I thought it was executed really well. It's a really cool moment to end the movie.
I'd say it's perfect. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So if and I just wish we got Freddy versus Jason. It didn't take 10 years to make that movie overall. So how do people react to this movie? How does it do with the box office overall?
I think it ended up making only about $14 million overall. I think the opening weekend was probably around, I'm guessing off memory, probably around 5-6 million on its opening weekend.
I seem to remember it premiering in the top 10 at least.
It makes 10 million almost 10 million the first 3 days it's out, on a budget of half of that. It makes about 10 million. So you got to be pretty excited if you're New Line Cinema. But then, to your point, Jason, it falls off the map. It ends with about 14 million and change. So I think once word got out, they're like, oh yeah, Jason's a giant worm in this movie and not really in it. People were like, fuck that noise, and they're not going to see it, which is unfortunate.
That same thing happened with the 2009 movie too, where it opened up humongous and then it just dropped off. It lost 80% of its business after that first weekend.
And I think in the case of 2009, you could argue anyone that wanted to see the movie went that first weekend. They were that excited for it. It's less about it being negative word of mouth and more about, there's only so many people that are into that movie that are going to go see it. Here, it feels like once people find out the general plot of it, and the word of mouth coming out of it wasn't great, people decide, I'll wait for the video at this point.
And that's with no real big internet presence yet either. It wasn't like there was social media. So for it to drop like that, I mean, they were getting killed with reviews for sure.
So, Mike, you had said, that Daily Grindhouse, I'm going to wait 1 second before I ask this, because it sounds like there's some movement going on back there. This one's going to be fun to edit. Is everything all right? Is that you, Jerry?
I'm back now. Yeah, I have no idea what happened.
Okay. So I was asking Mike, you had said Daily Grindhouse had done, and we'll find those articles and maybe link them in our show notes here. What was it that made Daily Grindhouse go back and do to revisit this movie and maybe defend the movie overall?
It's just a pitch that I always seem to get as assistant editor. It's always something that somebody really feels very strongly about. And I think it's more so to do with the fact that people feel so strongly the other way and are very vocal about it on social media that, the few, the proud, the brave that honest to God love Jason Goes to Hell have a lot to say about it. And you know what? I'll run 10 more defenses of Jason Goes to Hell.
Well, I may have one for you to submit to.
Because I love this movie. There's so much cool in it. It's ultra cool. It gives enough of what you want out of a Friday the 13th movie. That opening is all right, you want this kind of Friday the 13th movie, you're going to get it. But then we're going to blow Jason up at the end of it. And then, you get the campers. Yeah, we're going to kill some campers too. Don't worry about it. But he's also a giant worm, and the coroner's going to eat the heart, which is a stretch. And this is a movie that you can never really figure this out. What would it be received as today? Because I contend that Freddy's Dead, if Freddy's Dead came out today, it would be called a return to form for the series. People would be really excited about the way it portrays survivors, the imaginative deaths, the imaginative nightmare sequences. But in 1991, and for more of my thoughts on this, you can find me on the Halloweenies podcast. Apparently, I'm the guy to call in when you talk about the final movies of these of the series. We're doing Freddy's Dead. That'll be coming up in a couple weeks on the Halloweenies podcast. In 1991, it's just a franchise running out of steam.
Right.
But I contend that, Jason Goes to Hell, like, they injected an imagination into it, and it still holds up for me today.
I definitely would love to. Yeah, I think I need to go back and revisit Freddy's Dead, because my memory of it is it's a little bit of a tough watch, because it feels like, and I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot of empty space in that movie, that it feels really barren. Like the other Elm Street movies seem like there's always something going on. Like they really crackle with a lot of energy. And Freddy's Dead, which is weird because it's Rachel Tallahay. Am I saying that right? She ran with like the John Waters crew, and you think she would make a really kind of like bizarre and fucked up entry, and in a good way, and I just didn't find it to be that. But maybe I, like you said, need to go back and revisit it with a fresh pair of eyes.
It's perfectly okay. Like not every late era genre entry is ripe for rediscovery. Like I think you tell me why I should see Hellraiser 8. I've seen it, no but like Freddy's Dead. Freddy's Dead is perfectly okay. It's fine. It's a franchise running out of steam. Like, I badmouth all the Halloween sequels. Like I don't think there's any good Halloween movie except the original. But like Jason Goes to Hell. Like I don't know. It's just weird enough that it works for me.
Okay. Yeah, I love the effects of this movie. I love the tongue-in-cheek dialogue, like Steven telling the campers, like when they're like, "Oh, we're going out to Crystal Lake to go camping." He's like, "Oh, gonna smoke a little dope and have a little sex, right?" And then like and you're gonna get killed in it. Like I love how tongue-in-cheek this movie is, and it's a little bit ahead of its time in that way as well. It returns some of like Tom McLaughlin's humor that he had in Part 6. It kind of returns a little bit to that overall too, and it was like a really fun way to do it. Jason, you mentioned early on that this is the most divisive title and one of the most talked about titles over on your site. What is the scuttlebutt? Like, what do you see there normally?
Normally, it's just the fact that, it's different from the formula, sort of what we talked about before, where, it's just people, they can't, the biggest thing I have to tell you is that Jason isn't on screen long enough. And it's such a silly kind of argument to have, where Jason's in the movie a lot. And in fact, he's in the film on screen a lot more than other movies in the franchise. He really is.
He is.
In terms of, his body. That's the biggest argument I always see on the social media, is that alone. And you always have to shoot that down. And you can't just say that's the only reason why you don't like it. But realistically, I'd say that, and probably just that it's not a typical Friday the 13th film, in the worm, in the jumping around and such, definitely.
Right. Okay.
I think, in clearly not as negative as I make them out to be. I don't enjoy the movie really at all. But at the same time, I'm happy that it exists. I'm happy that Halloween 6 exists, even though I don't like it. I'm happy that Freddy's Dead exists, because I think it's interesting that each franchise has these entries that they're like, you know what, we're going to go so crazy that it is going to be that divisive. And I think every franchise needs movies like that. But even if they're not my cup of tea, I definitely appreciate the fact that they exist.
Agree. I would agree. Do we have anything else to add to Freddy versus Jason, gentlemen?
I'm good.
I rent it, love it. Put it in your top 5 where it belongs.
Excellent. So in closing, Mike, where can people find you, and what do online? Not like you don't want to give them your address. I mean, you can if you want. It's fine.
They could,
but
if they want to meet me in person, just come to the Rock Island Public House Saturday nights or all day Sundays in beautiful downtown Blue Island, Illinois. Online, you can find me at Mike Vanderbilt on Twitter or Mike Vanderbilt on Facebook. Just like the school, that's how it's spelled. Or you can find me over at Daily Grindhouse or Consequence of Sound and anywhere else that'll pay me to write.
And what are you working on right now? Like, what's paying the bills that you have coming up?
I got a big visual essay about Quentin Tarantino movies coming out at Consequence of Sound that I'm really excited about. And I'm still working on all of my Fantasia coverage. Trying to wrap all that up.
Were you out in Montreal last week?
I was 2 weeks ago. I was up in Montreal.
I need to get back there next year. Yeah, I need to get back there next year. It's such an awesome festival.
It's a great festival. Every festival I go to, I say, I'm not going back. I'm done. And then they get me back because I have such a good time there. I did see speaking of franchises, I did see the new Critters movie.
Hey, what'd you think of that real quick?
I want to get in this for just a minute. I will not go easy on this when I'm writing about it because it shouldn't be so hard to make an enjoyable Critters movie. And we got 2 bad ones in 2019 alone. And I'm a fan, and I'm a big fan of Critters 4. I think Critters 4 is there you go. There's the late era genre entry that needs to be rediscovered. Even though I said that, it's Critters 4. It's bad.
So did anything jump out in a good way at Fantasia? Like, what should we be looking out for?
The Phantom of Winnipeg documentary about the cult following that Phantom of Paradise developed in Winnipeg, Canada.
Excellent.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Keep our eyes out for that. And how about you, Jason? Where can people find you online right now? And what do you have? What are you working over on at Friday the 13th franchise.com?
Basically you can just find me at that website, Friday13thfranchise.com. All the social media is linked on that site. And currently we're just trying to put together some more pieces, some kind of like we did a top 3 kills in each film. We just finished up that right now. So we're working on a similar series of articles in the same vein. And then also just reporting on any of the news upcoming and anything to do with home video releases, which I just posted some really cool stuff. A German distributor, they're putting out some media books for part 6 through 8 with some unbelievable artwork that they got.
Oh, those look great.
Those are gorgeous. Yeah, we saw that post. Those look beautiful.
Yeah, no, I was really excited to find that and get that on the site. And then I guess the biggest thing is just waiting for that news that they finally got the rights battle figured out so we can get a new film in theaters.
Right. I think we might be dead and buried before that happens. But
and any listeners of the show that hasn't checked out Friday13thfranchise.com, you're definitely messing up because honestly, I visit that site every day. It's really great. The work you guys are doing is awesome.
It's been a tremendous resource in putting these shows together. We're now hit the 3/4 point, so it's been definitely like really helpful for us in terms of pulling out news and quotes and whatnot. So we really appreciate that. All right, so Jerry, why don't you tell our listeners what we have coming up next week?
Next week is Jason X, a movie that is also divisive. I lean more into the I'm pretty fond of it area. And we're going to have Jonathan Barkon from Dread Central and even a 5-minute appearance from the real star, Dexter Scott Elliott Smith, my 10-year-old. He begged us to let him talk for just a couple minutes about Jason X.
And so, for the record, Jerry didn't want him on. I'm like, no, let him on. Jerry was adamant. I don't want my kid.
Well, I mean, my son lives up to his name. I mean, his middle name's Elliot and his last name's Smith, so he's depressed all the time. So I figured,
Oh, jeez.
I mean, when you're named after a singer-songwriter that stabbed himself in the heart twice, you got to be a little easy on the kid. So yeah, he's going to be on it as well.
I don't know how to end on that note. Well, thanks, I guess.
No, okay, actually, what's funny, really super quick story. My daughter's named Dahlia. I named her after the Black Dahlia murder. I never told her why. No, it gets funny. I never told her why. She's asked me for years, Dad, what do you name me after? I'll tell you about it later. I took them to see Spider-Man Far From Home 2 nights ago, and those bastards felt the need to be like, oh, you like Dahlia, like the murder. And every single time that happened on screen, my daughter turned around and stared at me with these eyes like, you motherfucker. But yes, Dexter will be on the show next week along with John from Dread Central.
So thank you, everyone, for listening. Jason, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. You guys are always welcome back whenever you'd like.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So
thank you.
Definitely have you back on. And to our listeners, again, follow us over at Pod and Pendulum. Leave us a review, help spread the word, and we'll see you guys again next week. Thanks very much.